What about welfare? How do you feel about people who rely on welfare because they have no other means?
I usually say that welfare has its place, but don't make it a resting place. And welfare, as it is in this country now, has been a very unfair thing for blacks and minorities because it robs them of their own self-responsibility and gives people the idea that, well, the world and society owe me a living, and so I'm just going to demand that society just give me, give me, give me. And it takes away their self-respect and their self-responsibility. I think the welfare system should develop people so that they can be what they want to be and do what they want to do of their own resources and teach people of their own resources and develop people's self-potential so that they can make their own way in life. And they're going to have to do that.
I believe.
City of New York, since this goes out in New York, for example.
Yeah.
And nobody wants the city of New York, I don't guess, but I love it.
Yeah, I do too.
And, well, the Indians won't take it back now. They say, look what you've done to it.
Love that.
But anyway, you know, they were laying off working people in New York, like policemen and so on and so forth, and loading up the welfare rolls at the same time.
Yeah, because they had no other.
And I know well-bodied teenagers that are on welfare.
Hello, yes.
Well, but you mean there are jobs available and they're not taking them? Because
Well, I think the government, instead of trying to give so many handouts, should do something in terms of training people.
You mean like the
and make job
WPA?
programs. Well, that was before my time, so.
Oh, mine
but
too.
anyway,
No, but
I've heard about that, but I think, yes, that the government should have work programs to allow people to work for what they get.
yes.
And I think everybody who's on welfare should be put to work. Those who are able-bodied.
I think they'd be taught.
And they should be taught and trained to work for what they get. Because there's no such thing anywhere in the universe as something for nothing. And as long as an individual looks for something for nothing, that's just about what he's going to get.
Here, here. Yeah, that's very good.
Okay. So that's where spirit and matter work together. If you want more materialization and more wealth in your life, you have to have something that inspires you and some cause that's giving to people to be of service to people. I'm amazed at how people go out to their mailbox and they live in a fantasy that the mailbox is supposed to supply them with $1 million check out of the blue in some gambling game, when in fact it takes service. You know, there's one thing I say in my programs that unless you're willing to build a business that serves ever greater numbers of people, you have a delusion about building wealth, because it's not going to come unless you serve people. And if you don't have a desire to want to get up and do a service, you're holding yourself back from having the wealth that you want. And then you have to be able to refine that business and grow that business and develop that business, make it more effective and efficient to make sure there's profits in that business. Then you have to save a portion of those profits, then you have to invest those profits, and then you have to be able to accumulate the wealth, and then you have to be able to give back to society. If those aren't in place, the probability of you building wealth is very low. So in my programs, I teach people methodical, strategic specifics on how to do those 6 things. When they do, their wealth starts to happen in their life. But if they're looking for a quick get-rich scheme, they need to go to another guy that's going to tell them some hype and sell them some dopamine fix so they can go to the gambling casino with their life. Well, the only reason they're not holding on to money is because they value whatever they're spending it on more than they're actually saving and investing the money. When you really truly value money, you see opportunities for it, you take actions on it, and you actually do the savings and investments. You actually learn about them, you desire to learn about them. And when people don't value money, they value other things. The second they get money, they spend it on things that they value more. So when somebody says, I can't seem to be able to afford saving, no matter what I do, I can't get ahead, I can't save and invest, it means they don't have a value on that. They have a value on buying whatever it is that they're buying instead. So I show people how to shift their values so they can actually save and invest and build their wealth. Because if you're living in a fantasy that you're going to get wealthy without having the values that it makes to get wealthy, it's a fantasy. There's certain things that must be in place if you're going to be wealthy in your life financially. There's no greed involved in wealth building. That's a fantasy too. That's another delusion. That's a sign. See, if you get around people that have more wealth than you and other people around you that have less wealth than you, the people that have less wealth than you will think that you're expensive and greedy. The people that have more wealth than you will think you're cheap and generous. So the people you hang out with and their values will determine how they label you. But you're not greedy for having wealth. The people that devalue themselves think that. What you are is you're just providing greater service for people and you're saving and investing in yourself. If you value serving people and you value yourself, you've got the ingredients to make wealth. But you got to value serving people or there's no source of wealth, and you got to value yourself or there's no savings for wealth. If you have a high value on wealth building and you have spirituality at the top, they can dovetail together. Anytime two values are close to each other, they help each other. Anytime two values are far from each other on the list of values, priorities of people, the more they cancel each other. So some people have a very high value on spiritual quest and wealth building. There are many people that have very fast fortunes and they do great spiritual things in the world, but they have them connected. Other people have them disconnected. That's why when you don't see spirit and matter joined, they're disconnected. And you'll struggle because you'll think, I got to do spiritual things, but matter and money is not important to me. Well, it's interesting. The people that negate money the most work their whole life for it. And the people that value it most have money work for them. So when you value money, it starts working for you. When you don't value money, you'll be working your whole life for it. And I have been blessed to meet some of the billionaires and some of the very centimillionaires that are on there. And there's definitely certain traits that they have. And it's interesting. There's a roundtable discussion that meets 7:30 in the morning. And most of the guys get together. It's the roundtable guys. And they are talking about wealth. They're talking about finance. They're talking about economics, world issues. They're literally, that's their focus. They have a high value on mastering wealth. And the people that don't have a value on wealth, they don't show up. It's very, very straightforward. And what I've learned from them is that the more you study, the more you learn, the more you mentor, the more you focus, the more you value wealth, the more it becomes part of your life. I've watched people sometimes on stage, even in the same industry, in the sense of public speaking, and they sell hype, they sell a fantasy, they sell what will make people live, oh my God, this will be easy, I'll just make quick overnight money. And they make it look like there's real ease to it, when in fact they spent years developing things. And they give people the false impression, so people buy the fantasy and buy into dopamine. And anything that supports your values, you're vulnerable to because you're assuming it's going to make you a quick response. But I find that usually the people that are doing that have spent years, or they haven't made money in the ways that they say they're going to do it. They're making money off selling people on the fantasy. I'd rather give people the real facts about it and get them grounded and make them set realistic expectations and make them methodically do it. That's not as easy to sell because people want the quick get rich scheme, but it gets them the result. And I'd much rather give people the result in the long run than give them a fantasy that then tortures their life because they're not getting the result. And I think that this is what happens. Many people sell these fantasies. And it's easy to sell because it's a dopamine. And people, I think there's an old proverb that says, by the time the fantasy is spread across the world, the truth is put on its shoes. And I'd say, I'd rather have the truth. When I think of someone like Warren Buffett and Charlie, many people have a misunderstanding that somehow money is either good or evil, or this kind of thing, or it's not spiritual or is spiritual.
Exactly.
And these are not real truths. The truth is that anything that you do or somebody else does with money that happens to support or align with your values, you'll label good. Anything that somebody does with money that goes against your values or challenges your values, you'll label bad. If you assume or see people using money in a way that challenges your values, you'll sometimes unwisely associate evil with money, when in fact money is simply a means of exchange and has no moral issue associated with it. It's just a means of serving. Spirituality, it's time to break the fantasy and delusion that people have in the New Age movement about spirituality.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely ridiculous, some of the things they're believing. They think, I had a lady, I have to share a funny story. I had a lady who said to me, Dr. Demartini, what do you do when you're married to a materialist, capitalist, and all they do is think about money and making money and working and this? And I'm a spiritualist, and I believe in spirituality and metaphysics and things. And I said, great. So what do you do and what do you mean by your spiritual studies? Well, I meditate and I pray and I do chants and I go to metaphysical classes and I read inspirational books and I dedicate my life to going to sacred places, and very metaphysical and mystical. And I said, and so what does your husband do that you're so upset with? Said, well, all he does is go to work and he just makes money and he's talking about economics all the time and how he wants to save and how he wants to do this. And I said, let me explain something to you. He's not more material than you, and you're not more spiritual than him. And she goes, what do you mean? He's totally not into spirituality. I said, no, that's an illusion. He's into spirituality according to his version of it. And you're into spirituality according to your version of it. And your version isn't right and his isn't wrong. It's just different. And you're projecting onto him an expectation for him to be spiritual according to your beliefs and your value system. You got to realize this man of yours, this husband, he has a company. How many people work for him? And she said about 200. I said, and does he sell products and services across the world? She says, yes. I said, so that means he's serving millions of people across the world? She said, yes. And he's employing 200 people that are able to raise families and pay for children and be able to go to school and be able to contribute to society and pay taxes. And many of them are spiritually awakened individuals too. Well, yes. I said, let's get this straight. He dedicates his life to doing what he can to go and serve people across the world. He's making a contribution to 200 families' lives and all the secondary impacts that has, and helping them live an inspired life and raise family and populate the world and pay taxes and make society work. But you, sitting here contemplating your navel, sitting on your butt, depending on this materialist person for you to be able to go on trips and seminars and do studies of mysticism, you somehow think that you're more of a spiritual being, sitting there concentrating on your own self-development over the person that's now serving 200 people and millions of people across the world. He is not less spiritual. He's just spiritual in a way that you haven't honored because you've devalued that. And he has, in a sense, just as much service, and you have service in your own way. And you're also materialistic because you're dependent on him to be able to go on those trips and to be able to read those books and everything else. So you got to reframe what you're doing and open up spirituality to a universal, omnipresent state. Because where's God not? We go around and think that God is in this little box, but not in that box. The real truth is that it's all spiritual. And believe it or not, going and making a fortune means that you're serving vast fortunes of people. And that's the service. In fact, the study of economy and economics is actually derived, if you study it and look at the origins, it actually is derived from theology. And if you study theology, the word goods and services, and anybody who devalues money will end up giving it away to other people who value it. Money automatically circulates in the economy through society to whoever values it most. And whoever values themselves most, values money most, and does things of service that other people value most. That's where the money ends up. In Tibet, many centuries ago, they did an experiment with money, and they equilibrated all the wealthy and redistributed the wealth where everybody had the same amount of money. So thousands of people now had the same amount of money. They took the wealthy and they gave it from the poor to the wealth to the poor. In 3 months, the money was redistributed because the people who value it end up back with it every time, and the people who don't end up losing it every time. People that devalue themselves, devalue money, and are not willing to care enough about humanity to serve and go out and make a difference and work hard for it, those individuals automatically have money taken from them, guaranteed. They'll be a spender, not a saver, and they'll end up devaluing it and devaluing themselves, and they'll say goodbye to money every time.